Today, we are diving into a really fascinating legal case, one that didn't just end a marriage, but actually flipped the script on what cruelty can mean in a relationship, at least in the eyes of the law. It's a story about how a law made to be a shield can sometimes be used as a sword. And that really brings us to the heart of the matter, the big question this whole case revolves around. Can the very act of using the legal system against your partner cross a line and become a form of cruelty? It's a tricky one, right? Well, a landmark ruling gave a surprisingly clear answer. Let's get into how it all went down. All right, so let's meet the two people at the center of all this, Kavita and Harish Raisen. Now, like a lot of messy divorces, this story starts with a marriage. But it pretty much immediately splits into two completely different, totally conflicting versions of reality. So you gotta understand, their marriage was, well, it was incredibly short. They get married in April of 2001. By December of the next year, Kavita is gone for good. If you do the math, they only actually lived together for about 8 months. Just 8 months. That's barely any time at all for things to fall apart so completely. And this is where things get complicated, because you have two totally different versions of those same 8 months. Harish, the husband, he claimed that Kavita was cruel right from the start, that she refused to have a physical relationship and then just up and abandoned the marriage. Kavita, on the other hand, she painted a much, much darker picture. She said there were immediate demands for dowry, that she suffered horrible physical and mental abuse, and that she basically had to run for her life. One marriage, two completely opposite realities. So, this wasn't just going to be a private he said, she said argument. Oh, no. Things escalated, and they escalated fast, because one side decided to bring in the big guns, the criminal justice system. And that move would become the absolute turning point for this entire story. So here's how it went down. In May 2003, Kavita files a formal criminal complaint, and that leads very quickly to the arrest of not just Harish, but 6 of his family members. And then, get this, Kavita's father, who happened to be a police officer, personally shows up in court to argue against Harish getting bail. I mean, that's a pretty clear signal, right? This was about applying maximum pressure. Now, the charges here were no joke. The main one was under Section 498A of the Indian Penal Code. That's the country's anti-dowry harassment law, designed to protect women from being abused over dowry demands. She also added a charge of criminal intimidation. And it wasn't just Harish. The complaint named his parents, his 2 sisters, his brother, and his sister-in-law. The whole family was pulled into this. So you've got these incredibly serious accusations on the table. The case starts moving through the system. But what happened with that criminal complaint had this totally unexpected boomerang effect on the civil divorce proceedings that were happening at the same time. And here it is. This is the moment the whole case pivots. A higher criminal court reviewed everything, and it didn't just dismiss the charges. The judge did something much more specific, issuing a finding that the allegations were, and I'm quoting here, false. That one word from a judge, false, changed everything. So what you end up with is this wild tale of 2 courts. On one side, you have the criminal court saying, nope, this complaint was false. And then, armed with that official ruling, Harish goes over to the family court, and they grant him a divorce on the grounds of cruelty. Not the cruelty he was accused of, but the cruelty he suffered by being falsely accused in the first place. Well, that decision got appealed, of course, and it all went up to the High Court. And this is where we get to the landmark part of the story. The High Court looked at this bizarre situation and used it to craft a really powerful new interpretation of what mental cruelty can actually mean inside a marriage. So, what is mental cruelty, legally speaking? It's important to get this right. India's Supreme Court defines it as any kind of behavior that causes so much mental pain and anguish that you just can't reasonably expect a couple to keep living together. And the key thing here? It has absolutely nothing to do with physical violence. So, using that definition, the High Court looked at what Kavita did and basically made a list. They said, okay, this is cruelty. Filing a criminal case that was later proven to be false, that's cruelty. Getting your husband and his family arrested based on it, that's cruelty. Going out of your way to make sure he doesn't get bail, yep, cruelty too. And on top of all that, making up these other wild accusations to destroy his reputation, that is character assassination, and that is cruelty. And it all boils down to this one single powerful idea from the court. They said, when you take a law that was created to be a shield to protect people and you turn it into a sword to get revenge, that act right there is in itself a profound form of cruelty. So you might be thinking, okay, that's a wild story, but why are we still talking about a case from 2006? Well, because its impact went way beyond just this one couple. It touched on a huge social issue, and its shockwaves are still felt in courtrooms today. To really get it, you have to understand the context of the time. There was this big, widespread debate happening in India about the anti-dowry law. Now, everyone agreed it was an absolutely vital law that protected countless real victims. But there were also these growing concerns that it was sometimes being misused as a tool to settle personal scores in a messy divorce. The legacy of this case is huge. For starters, it officially established that filing a false malicious case against your spouse is a valid reason for divorce. It created a kind of legal check on the misuse of these protective laws. It was all about finding a balance, you know? How do we protect genuine victims while also preventing false accusations from running wild? And maybe most importantly, it recognized that cruelty isn't gender-specific. Either partner can be the one inflicting it. These principles still influence how courts look at marital disputes to this day. Which kind of leaves us with one final big thought. This case drew a clear legal line in a very specific situation, but it points to a much broader question, one that applies way outside of a courtroom. In any conflict, where is that fine, blurry line between seeking justice and just seeking revenge?